I lead up our lease accounting practice. We've been helping our clients transition to the new lease accounting rules for the last 4 to 5 years, helping a lot of publicly traded companies as well as some private companies. And this is a standard that's came out in 2016. It's been deferred and deferred. Then COVID happened, it got deferred again, and now it's finally upon us. And for our calendar year end clients and companies, the adoption date is January 1, 2022. This is not an optional adoption, so this is something that everyone has to adopt. If you have GAAP, US GAAP basis financials, you're required to adopt this standard. This is one that has been coming for several years now, and it's in summary, it's the recognition of operating leases on our balance sheet. So whereas we used to just disclose the commitments related to operating leases in our footnotes, now we are calculating a right of use asset and a right of use liability and putting that on our balance sheet. And that's for any leases that have terms greater than 12 months. And there will be no change with the income statement presentation. So it's a common question I receive is, what's the impact to my P&L? It shouldn't change. So you're going to continue to have straight line rent, and your capital leases will continue to have amortization and interest expense. And where we used to refer to our capital leases are now going to be referred to as finance leases. There's a lot of additional disclosure requirements. So some things that we haven't tracked before, like our weighted average remaining useful life, our weighted average discount rate, the reconciliation of rent expense, to name a few, are some quantitative disclosures that we're going to be required to keep track of and disclose in our financials. Similar to ASC 606, the revenue standard that came out several years ago, 842, the lease standard, is a prospective adoption, and it's a principles-based standard, whereas the Brightline rules have kind of disappeared, and it's more of a principles-based standard. And so we will adopt as of January 1, 2022 going forward. We're not going to, we have the option to go back and do a comparative adoption, but we are not coaching our clients to do that unless they feel that it's absolutely necessary. Similar but different from ASC 606, 842 is more than just a documentation exercise. So if we can recall back to the new revenue standard, it was more of a reviewing some contracts and drafting a memo documenting our new revenue model. Well, 842 involves a lot of additional time with adoption. So you can take the number of leases and multiply it by a number of hours, perhaps 2 hours per lease. And that'll give you an idea of how long the adoption will take you. It's also going to impact your monthly processes, where operating leases used to be off balance sheet. They're now on balance sheet. And so that requires closer attention, as well as, a month-end reconciliation process. And if you plan to use software for the adoption of 842, you're going to have that added complexity of reconciling to the subledger of that lease accounting system. In addition to this being a lot of time and effort to adopt this standard, you might not even have full grasp of all your leases, and so this exercise, this adoption will require you to go and find all of those lease agreements, create a portfolio, population of leases, and then you'll be required to read those agreements, pull out those key terms, and then build that accounting. And so that's where, one of the questions that I often get from my clients is, should I use software, or can I do this in Excel? What's the easiest way to adopt this standard? And if you have a large portfolio of leases, I would say, 100 or more leases, you probably need something a little bit more robust, like a lease accounting software solution that can handle that accounting for you. So if you can imagine an Excel workbook, if you're comfortable having one tab per lease, so if you have 50 leases, you'd have 50 tabs. That's what it would look like in Excel, because when you build this accounting, you're basically building an amortization schedule for the asset and the liability, and it kind of schedules out all of the detailed accounting there. So that's kind of the question to ask yourself is it Excel, is it software? I would encourage you to meet with your accounting firms, your auditors or your consultants, because a lot of groups like LBMC have developed their own internal tools that can help you with that adoption without having to go down the road of, formally adopting without going down the road of implementing a new software solution. So, something else that I'm also coaching my clients, especially right now, as the standards right up on us, is go ahead and start modeling the impacts of what this looks like on your balance sheet. I know, for companies that have debt covenant requirements with, certain kinds of coverage ratios, right of use asset lease liabilities might not be carved out from that coverage ratio calculation. And it might be something you want to go ahead and start talking with your lender about, is having an exclusion for, those new liabilities that are going to be appearing on your balance sheet. And if you think you have, concerns there, you probably want to meet with, your board, your investors, anybody that might care to know about the impacts of what that's going to look like from a debt covenant compliance perspective. And that's about it for today. It is a complex standard in terms of, the nuances of discount rates, interpreting lease terms, and, determining lease classification, those kinds of things. It can be really challenging. So I encourage you, if you haven't already, get with your accounting firm to help you navigate the complexities there. Thank you.